Moran writes that she had literally no friends in 1990, and so had plenty of time to write her first novel, The Chronicles of Narmo, at the age of 15. At 16, she joined Music Weekly Melody Maker, and at 18, hosted the pop show Naked City. Following this precocious start, she then put in 18 solid years as a columnist on The Times, London that is, both as a television critic and also in the most read part of the paper, the satirical celebrity column, Celebrity Watch, winning the British Press Awards Columnist of the Year Award in 2010 and Critic and Interviewer of the Year in 2011. The eldest of 8 children, Caitlin read lots of books about feminism, mainly in an attempt to be able to prove to her brother Eddie that she was scientifically better than him. She achieved that goal in 2011 with the publication of her best-selling book, How to Be a Woman. Tonight, she joined, thank you, on her behalf. Tonight, she joins us to talk about her second novel, How to Be a Girl. From what I gather, the book was really, really difficult for Caitlin to write, but of course you wouldn't know that from the way that it flows. If you've read her first book, How to Be a Woman, you know that she loves Philadelphia. How could she not? Now it's our chance to love her back. Please welcome Caitlin Moran.
Okay, you're gonna have to stop now. I'm British, that's embarrassing. I can't take more than 12 seconds of positivity or praise. Well, thank you for coming. Lovely to see you here. I'm so glad to finally be in the city that inspired my favourite foodstuff, cheese, Philadelphia cheese. That's my favourite thing. Haven't eaten any yet, but if anybody's got some and they want to give me a fingerful later on, that is the correct way to eat it, with your fingers. I would never waste spreading it on some kind of other form, and you can just have it pure, as a pure hit of cheese. I've been doing this tour in the US, and all the other ones I have been on stage and I've been interviewed by someone, and there's been some kind of communication thing where, some kind of fuck up, where I'm not being interviewed on stage today. We only realised this 30 seconds ago backstage. So what I'm going to have to do is interview myself. That's okay, I generally get on with me. I know the kind of things that I'm into. I suspect I'll give myself a fairly easy ride, so you can ask me the tough questions later in the Q&A. So I'm going to start by asking myself how I am. That's a very interesting question, Caitlin. I am quite hungover, as well you know. I was in Boston last night, and I didn't realise I had friends in Boston until I found myself in a bar drinking margaritas at 4 in the morning. But yeah, so I have a slight hangover, and I'm asking myself what kind of hangover it is, because there are 4 or 5 different kinds of hangovers. This is one of those lovely fuzzy ones, like a lion, like a big sexy lion like Aslan, and it comes along and it holds you in its jaws, and it's slightly scary but also oddly comforting. So long as you're completely limp in its jaws and don't try and do anything or move, you'll be fine in the jaws of this lovely liony hangover. So I have a lion hangover today of, I would say, a grade 4, 6 being the highest kind of hangover that you can have. I'm going to ask myself, now I've got a chance to talk to myself, if I'm good in bed. Yes, I am. I am an absolutely superb lay. I'm willing. I can be noisy, but I'm also aware that the walls in our house are very thin, and so if the kids are around, I can quieten that right down. I can admit that sometimes I say stupid things when I'm in the middle of the throes of sexual intercourse. I once shouted, "Give it some welly," at my husband. Don't know where that phrase came from. We both had to stop having sex immediately. We just sat there looking at where the great sex had been and just went, I just have to leave that there. I noticed that in my introduction it was mentioned, Caitlin, that you found it difficult to write this book. Why was that? You're usually quite a chatty and verbose person. Why did you find it difficult to write this book? Well, my arse hurt. The thing about writing a book is that writing's really easy. It's just simply sitting on a chair for 6 months that hurts. My lower back hurt quite a lot, and I had to buy myself a posturally correct stool. I don't know if anybody's got a posturally correct stool, but they're the least dignified thing ever. They're basically like you're riding on an imaginary horse. That's how you have to sit on it, like that. And I would often imagine that it was a real horse, specifically the horse Artax from the Never-Ending Story. And when it was a bad day and I found it difficult to write, I would talk to imaginary Artax and go, "It's okay, old son, it's okay, come on. We can get going through the Slough of Despond. We're going to live. Don't die, Artax." And then Artax, that's a spoiler for anybody who's not seen the Never-Ending Story, but Artax does in fact die in the Slough Despond. Sorry about that. So, How to Build a Girl. Why did you write this book, Caitlin? Why was that? Well, there were 5 things that I wanted to talk about in a book with some degree of urgency. The first one, for those who've read the book, you will note that it's there on page 1, sentence 1, was the issue of female masturbation. The book opens with 14-year-old Johanna Morgan having a bit of a fiddle with herself in order to take the edge off a bad day. And there were many reasons why I wanted to write about that. The first one being that if I ever see anything that's called a taboo subject, I like to run towards it screaming, going, that's my stuff! That's the stuff I would like to be writing about. I'm going to drag this out into the light and stand around it, banging on a pan with a spoon, going, let's all talk about the taboo subject. That is the purpose of art and culture. If a 13-year-old girl is too shy to start a difficult subject, such as masturbation, then my job is to be able to start that conversation for her, literally take one for the team, and allow her to go to her friends and go, I would obviously never talk about masturbation, but Captain Moran's been talking about it. What do you think of that? As I was growing up, I didn't go to school. I was home educated, which basically means I had no education at all. If anybody knows anyone who's been homeschooled, you'll notice that they're quite feral and don't really know that much. They also have massive social anxiety as well. It's an incredible package. So the only education I had was going to my local library every day and reading pretty much every book in there. And my favourite thing was the books of the 19th century and early 20th century for girls. This was good in some respects. The majority of the plots of those are about working class girls who kind of, through ingenuity and skill and courageousness, will finally triumph against all odds. Jane Eyre, Anne of Green Gables, What Katie Did, Little Women. So in that respect that they're good. And you also learn a lot of important life tips as well. For instance, Jane Eyre taught me that if you do fancy someone really rich and really hot, who's already married to someone, if you give it a while, they might get all burnt in a castle and go blind. And then you can move in and have them. So just got to play the waiting game with Mr. Rochester. So that was the good part about those books. But as a 13-year-old girl who had recently discovered masturbation, and as I noted in my diary, this is ace! Doesn't cost anything, and it doesn't make you fat. Well, hey! I couldn't understand why there was no masturbation in any of these books. Again, Jane Eyre's there in that castle for fucking years. Looking at the hot Mr. Rochester, would she not just go off and just have a quick go? Like, you know, a quick fap? And it's all the way through popular culture. You know, I was watching Gravity with Sandra Bullock, and it's like, hang on, Sandra Bullock's alone in space, in her pants, quite stressed. Surely she'd have a fiddle at some point to take the edge off. Like, she's got nothing else to do. Where, I kept asking myself, is female masturbation? So I wanted to write about that. And it's very important. Obviously, A, it's a dirty subject, and I love dirty subjects, and B, it's also very funny. The word fap is one of my favourite words. It's a funny word. But it's also an important political thing, because I was writing a coming-of-age novel, literally. And, come on. Literally. And the usual structure for a coming-of-age novel is that with the girl is that it starts off, and then halfway through she'll discover her sexuality when a man comes along and shows her what sex is all about. He will awaken her sexuality. And I know from my personal experience and that of all my female friends that no one had to awaken our sexuality. You know, we were awakening it ourselves, thank you very much, several times a night. You know, there's a reason why the human body is designed so that your hand will naturally rest there when you're lying down. That's God's way of saying have a wank. That's how evolution made us. So that's the first thing I wanted to write about was masturbation, because it's very important for girls to know they own their own sexuality. You don't have to wait for a man to come along and tell you what it is. And the urgency of wanting to write about this was piqued by the success of 50 Shades of Grey, which I sometimes take as, quite personally, as the worst thing that's ever happened to me, the publication of that book. It infuriates me to the point that ants come out of my eyes, and that's quite a high level of fury. I think the problem with that is that that's a book where, first of all, you know, I know a lot of people in the BDSM community, and I've had some experience of that myself, and there's a reason why you would become a masochist. There's usually something that's happened in your childhood where you've experienced pain, and then the human brain is a really clever and beautiful thing. It will push things that you're traumatized by into your sexy area, and you will sexualize it later. So if you've experienced pain, you know, if you've been beaten or whipped as a child, you'll kind of go, maybe I'll make it sexy, and this is the way that I can deal with it and have some fun at the same time. There are emotional prerequisites for you being a masochist. Anastasia Steele in that book does not have any of these prerequisites at all. And so that book is essentially a story about how a girl, in exchange for material goods, such as a ride in a helicopter or an iPad, is repeatedly beaten on the clitoris with a hairbrush by a maniac. And it distressed me that so many women were going to have this as their first introduction to sex. That's not what sex is like. You know, that's not what sex should be like if you don't have an interest in being beaten on the clitoris with a hairbrush. I think it's very important that if you see yourself as one of culture's dirty aunties, that you should be the one telling people about sex and telling them what it is. And there were many key things that I wanted to tell young women about sex. One of them was for them to understand that life generally divides into two kinds of experiences. One, amazing times that you enjoy at the times, experiences that you enjoy while they're happening. And two, experiences which are terrible at the time, but which will later make future incredible anecdotes. Things that you will be in the bar with your friends going, he did what? No, with wine coming out of your nose. And that is generally, experience set two, is generally what sex in your teenage years and early 20s will be like, I regret to tell you, for those of you who are that young. You know, you've got a good solid 10 years of quite bad lays to look forward to. But these will be later future incredible anecdotes. And so, you know, I wanted to write about that. And because life can never be awful. Even if you know that later on it will make an incredible anecdote, you can enjoy any experience so long as you're imaginarily in your head telling your friends about it later. I would imagine even Jesus, when he was on the cross, was thinking, the guys aren't going to believe this when I tell them later. This is out there. So sex was the first one. The second one was I wanted to talk about class. It was very important for me to see working class girls represented, not being downtrodden, not being drug dealers, not being seen as marginalised, but being seen as a progressive working class, intellectual working class, you know, an amusing intellectual working class female character we do not tend to see, you know, either in the UK or in this country, not since they cancelled Roseanne. So that was very important to me. No, the third one was about pop music and the character of John Kite in there, who is my manic pixie dream boy, ideal rock star, future boyfriend stroke husband. And the reason he's a kind of overweight Welsh working class autodidact, very borderline alcoholic, very amusing. And I wanted to write about a rock star like that because the whole idea of girls falling in love with rock stars and wanting to have sex with them or wanting to be a groupie is enormously devalued when the only rock stars that you see in films or in books tend to be skinny, stupid men who want to have sex with teenage girls and wear shades all the time and leather jackets and just smoke cigarettes and are stupid and just go, all right, and fall over. And of course, that makes girls look stupid if those are the kind of people they want to have sex with. And those weren't the boys that I wanted to have sex with that were in bands. In the early 90s in Britain, the boys that in bands, there was a whole rash of these beautiful working class Celtic boys like Teenage Fan Club and the Boo Radleys and now Guy Garvey from Elbow, who were all kind of slightly overweight autodidacts who would sit in the pub and quote poetry to you. So I wanted to immortalise that kind of rock star. And then the main thing was that I wanted to talk about constructing yourself. That's why it's called How to Build a Girl. For a while it was going to be called Big Boys Made Me Do It, which was also the story of my life. But How to Build a Girl seemed really key because I think one of the main things, one of the sort of ground level experiences that most women have is being self-loathing. Self-loathing tends to be the default mode for so many women. And the only flash of genius I've ever had in my life was at the age of 14 as a very self-loathing teenage girl going, okay, if I loathe myself, what kind of self would I love? What would I have to be to love myself? And then just realizing, well, be that, pretend to be that. Pretend to be that, because there's no difference between pretending to be something and being it. That brilliant drag queen phrase of fake it till you make it is absolutely true. And you realise that all teenage girls, and indeed all teenagers, have a template for the ideal self that they would love. It's there on their bedroom walls. Every teenager's bedroom wall looks exactly the same. We have pictures of our heroes, torn out of newspapers and magazines. We have pages from books that we found inspiring. We have poems. We have a beautiful dried leaf that we found on a walk that makes us feel really deep when we look at it. And they're all there, collaged on the wall. And all you need to do is go, I will take what is on the wall now, and I will put it into my head. That is who I will become. And so when Joanna has her moment where she realises that's who she's going to be, the sum total of all of her heroes, and makes herself that, she has her big makeover. She changes the way that she looks as well. And that was another thing that I wanted to do in the book, because all makeover scenes with women in any film or any book are really hateful and annoying. They always suddenly mysteriously lose 2 stone and go and get a blow dry and buy some sexy clothes and learn to walk in heels, and then they walk out kind of like they just stepped out of a salon, and it's kind of like, yeah, finally I'm sexy. That was my makeover. And I find it really distressing that there's only 2 options for women, that you can either be ugly or beautiful. I think we've forgotten there's option 3, which is be weird. You know, being weird is an incredibly important and valid choice for a girl to make. And so that's why when Johanna has her makeover, she basically dresses herself up like a gothic highwayman or pirate. She gets a black waiter's jacket and a frilly blouse, cut-off shorts, tights, pair of Doc Martin boots, and a top hat, which she puts on. And the reason that she has the top hat is an homage, firstly, to the Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland, and secondly, Slash from Guns N' Roses. And Slash was one of my first feminist heroes because we loved Guns N' Roses so fucking bad when we were kids. Like me and all my siblings, we loved them so much, and we just thought that they were just otherworldly, just extraordinary rock gods. And then we found out that Slash from Guns N' Roses is he's not American, he's British. He comes from a town about 20 miles away from where we lived in Wolverhampton, which is a shit town called Stoke-on-Trent, where nothing ever happens ever, and that he was really a boy called Saul. And what Saul had done one day is went, I hate Saul, I'm going to put on a top hat and become Slash from Guns N' Roses. And that was his makeover moment. That's when he faked it till he made it. And that was what I learnt from Slash. He was one of my early feminist awakening moments. So those are the themes in the book. Those are the things that I wanted to tackle. Oh God, along with cynicism, that was the last one. I was in the very unique position at the age of 16 of being able to talk to a national audience. I worked on the music press and in the national press, and so everything that I wrote, would have an audience. And because I was surrounded by big boys and because I was ashamed of my innocence and naivety, as so many teenagers are, I put upon me the protective armour of cynicism, and I turned into a massive bitch for about 2 years and wrote horrible things about bands. There was one particularly awful review of a band called Ned's Atomic Dustbin, where I imagined that I was at their funeral, and that the review that I was giving was the eulogy of their funeral. It opened with, I have been chosen to say the last words as we bury your career, as I throw the earth onto your dead faces and say the last few words. I mean, I literally can't say the rest of it because it still makes me bum clench so badly I will fall over backwards. It was absolutely horrible. And what I learnt quite quickly, mainly because the man who is now my husband came up to me one day and went, all the stuff you've been writing, it's a bit off, which is about as critical as he's ever been. And in that moment I realised this lovely cardigan-wearing man had indeed called time on my career as a bitch. I had thought that it didn't matter if you wrote it down, that it meant less if you wrote it down. But of course it means more when you write things down. And also what I hadn't understood at that point, that there's no difference in pretending to be an asshat and actually being an asshat. They're completely the same things. And indeed, we don't need any more asshats. The world is full of asshats. There is a massive stockpile of asshats. We've got enough to last in the next millennium. And I thought that people would somehow know that I was still a really lovely person who would pick worms up off the pavement in case they were drowning in the rain, and would cry when I talked about Nelson Mandela, even though everything I was writing was really horrible. And so that was the moment I decided that I would have to be what I felt I was inside and be a nice and positive person. But the cool thing is now, of course, that, then I was, a very rare thing of a teenage girl with a national audience. But now, every teenage girl has a national and international audience because you're on social media. Everything that you put on Facebook, everything you put on Twitter, you are writing to an audience now. And that's where you notice that the default mode for so much social media is cynicism. It's people immediately, as soon as someone does something heroic, people are immediately wanting the backlash, immediately trying to find the fault in people snarking at each other. You gain points for being a bitch on the internet. And the problem with when you put on the armour of cynicism to protect you, you find out very soon that it constricts your growth. You cannot dance in armour, you cannot run in armour, you cannot grow in armour, and you cannot progress in armour. And so that was why it's very important for me to make Johanna's story realising that cynicism was no good for her, and that she needed to go back to being a light-hearted, giddy optimist, which is how she starts off the book. And talking of self-loathing, I'm going to do a reading from the book in a minute. I'll do a reading from the book first. Which isn't about self-loathing at all, it's about shagging. One of the things that I wanted to do was to try and reclaim the word slag. The idea of being a strumpet or a sleepabout. I wanted to reclaim that word, and then I realised that was going to be quite difficult, and it's not a nice word. So I decided that I would invent 2 new words instead to describe a sexually active woman. The first was lady sex pirate. And the second was swashbuckler. So in the middle of the book, Johanna has turned into the lady sex pirate for swashbuckler, and she's sleeping around quite a lot. And the reading is from the high point of her sleeping around days. So it's where she meets a man that we refer to as Big Cock Al. I like how you can tell quite a lot about him from his name there. That's nominative determinism in action there. big cock Al. So, I'm wearing only a dark blue nylon petticoat, and Al is down to his trousers. I've just unzipped his fly and released the biggest penis that I have ever seen. It takes fully 2 hands to get it out of his pants. It makes me feel like I'm a snake handler. It is alarmingly huge. In my startlement, I believe that I hear it go thump when it comes out. The last time I saw something like this, it was at my dead fat Nana's house across the bottom of the front door as a draft excluder. With 2 buttons for eyes. There were boys that I went to school with who had legs shorter than this. Blimey, I say, agitated into speaking like a Cockney chimney sweep, who has just spotted a lucky silver sixpence. I know, Al says, with the lazy, triumphant grin of the gigantically well-endowed. Now, everything I have ever read up until this point had led me to unquestioningly believe that the more penis, the better. Jilly Cooper in her filthy novels has been very literally firm on this matter, that men's cocks are basically like a buffet at a party. There's simply no such thing as too much. Whatever you can't handle that night in the heat of the moment can simply be cling-filmed and had for breakfast the next day as a treat. This, however, is clearly not the case here, because this penis is so large, it's basically a medical emergency. You don't need a vagina, I think. You're simply trying to avoid rental charges on an appropriate storage facility. My friend, you're going to need permits to park something like this. That, I say in a friendly voice, is a very large penis. Yes, Al says, quite urgently. Suck it, make it bigger. I will do no such thing, you joker. I am not a lunatic. But what am I going to do? This is quite the dilemma. If I continue touching this penis, it will, as I have just been fairly warned, although it seems frankly impossible, get even bigger. If I try and fuck it, it's just going to go straight through me and come out the top of my head. Like the steak on a scarecrow. What I really need is for Al to offer to go down on me, because that's the kind of sex we can have without it killing me. But this appears not to have occurred to him, and my understanding about men eating women out is that the rules are a bit like the Prime Directive in Star Trek. You know, where the crew of the Enterprise are forbidden from telling other, more primitive cultures about the astonishing and enjoyable technological advances on other planets. We end up having sex, of course. You must never look a gift hose in the mouth. And while I'm having the sex, I find time to compile in my head a little list of hints and tips for a future putative help sheet, which would be entitled, Ladies, How You Too Can Deal with an Unfeasibly Large Penis by a Friend. Tip number 1. When in the missionary position, place your palms flat on the chest and brace with your arms. This will limit thrust depth. It will also pleasingly push your tits together, so it's kind of a good tip for looking hot or taking selfies. Tip number 2. In doggy, you can subtly but essentially keep crawling away from the penis, making it impossible to get more than the first 5 inches inside. During our 10-minute session, I managed to make a whole circuit of the bed on all fours, as Al ardently pursues me kneeling. A speeded-up film of this would make Al look like Lawrence of Arabia, very slowly riding his camel, me, around a putative bedsit fuck arena. Tip number 3, of course, is to watch out for cystitis. The last thing I'm going to do before we go to Q&A is I'm going to quickly tell you a story about my self-loathing journey. When I was a 14-year-old girl, I was very overweight and very unhappy. We were very poor, so I couldn't do anything to make myself more beautiful. I couldn't afford clothes or makeup. I would occasionally draw on my face with felt tips in order to crudely give myself eyeliner, but that gave me a rash, which made the problem worse. The only thing that I could do that I could think of to make myself more beautiful was to simply grow my hair very long. That's all you can do when you're very poor, is grow your hair very long. In some respects, I was basically a hair farmer for about 5 years. I would simply eat a lot of cheese thinking it would make my hair grow long. And so there was one point where I was doing a kind of, at the age of 14, I can remember standing naked in front of the mirror and going through my body piece by piece. And I started off by looking at my feet. I have very flat feet. I have very weak ankles. I've recently started doing Pilates because I'm now a middle-class wanker. And in order to still keep it feeling rock and roll, I put it on the calendar, I misspell it deliberately and put it down as Pirates, so it looks like I'm hanging out with pirates on those days where I'm doing it. I was amazed to be told by my Pilates instructor recently that there are muscles in my feet. She was telling me to tense the muscles in my feet. I was like, there's no muscles in feet. She was like, there are. I was like, no, they're just meat. They're like sausages. That's all they are. She was like, no, I think you'll find there are muscles in feet. So that was a revelation. So at the age of 14, very flat feet. And then I moved up my body to my legs. I'm of Celtic extraction, so my legs are a very pale blue colour. And which is why they're always covered in at least 100 denier lycra. There's usually, in the beginning of the spring, there's a rash. Women will know about this. The magazines will suddenly declare at one point, it's time to get your legs out, ladies. It's time to get ready for the summer. And there will then follow 4 or 5 pages of telling you how you can get your legs ready for the summer with waxing or shaving or whatever. None of these features tell you the actual truth about getting your legs ready for the summer, which is that if you are going to shave your legs, you will then get a horrible speckly red rash, which will last almost as long as it takes for the hair to grow back in again. It's actually impossible to have legs. I think of my legs as basically being like an internal organ. They need not to be shown to the public. They need to be kept safely inside. So there I had blue, hairy legs as a 14-year-old girl. And then I moved up to my thighs, and I was lucky enough to be growing up in the early 90s where we still hadn't invented that most evil of things, the thigh gap. That's a thing now. I can remember when I first read about the thigh gap, and they were explaining that the idea is that you will have legs that are so thin, thighs that are so thin, that there will be a gap at the top of your legs. Apparently it should be large enough to be able to fit your fist between your legs. You should be able to see sunlight between your legs, and you should be large enough to fit your fist in between your legs. There should be a gap there. As I was reading about this, I was going, a gap large enough to fit a fist in between my legs. A gap large enough to fit... Do you mean my vagina? That's the only thigh gap I can think of. And I was looking in the mirror and I realised again that I was not normal. Everything that I was led to believe that should be there with the female body was not happening with me. For instance, I have an absolutely ferocious camel toe. It's basically a camel foot. It's huge. I'm essentially well hung. I've got a lot down there. I can dress either to the left or to the right. So that caused me a great deal of distress looking at the mirror going, I just got too much, man. This is bad. I should have a teeny weeny little fairy vagina. I've got a big meaty mons. This is bad. Then there was my belly, which was the locus at that point of all my self-loathing. At this point, and it's a terrible story to have to tell, and possibly the only sad one I'll ever tell you, but at the age of 14, my biggest dream was that I would be involved in a massive car crash in which I would almost die, but not quite, and I would be wheeled into hospital where my body would be rebuilt 4 stone lighter and with possibly a different face as well. This was the big thing that I was gunning for in later years. I was like, this is the only way I can solve all my problems and like myself. If I almost die, but am rebuilt as the bionic woman. And then my breasts were also distressing. I can remember looking in the mirror and I had, as all women do, one breast larger than the other. And this was a pre-internet era, so I didn't know this was normal. I presumed that it was, a fault that was personal only to me. And one day I was in the bath, hanging out there with one breast larger than the other. And my sister came in and said, I think, you know how your tits are different sizes? I think that's my fault. And I went, why? She went, do you remember a couple of weeks ago when I went, honk on that breast? I think it's like balloons when I went, honk on that breast. All the matter went into this one, and that's... I did that, that's me. So that was how bad I felt about my body at the age of 14. Literally a tick list, all of it was bad. Anyway, we fast forward now to the age of 34, and I've done a lot of work since then. I built the self that I would love, and I now think I'm pretty cool. I like myself, I'm kind of vaguely hygienic. I know the difference between up and down. I can walk through doors without bumping into them, and I think I'm pretty cool, man. So I've gone on a journey. I've learnt to love myself. And to the point where when I wrote How to Be a Woman, I went into a meeting at my publishers, and they said, we've got some ideas for the cover of the book. And I went, actually, I've got some ideas for the cover of the book. I want to do something called My Feminist Smile. And they went, what's that? And I said, it's this. What I'm going to do is draw some eyes on a bra, and then I will flap out my belly fat and manipulate it into a smiley face. And they said, we might just go for a head and shoulders shot. So, yes. So that's me. I've interviewed me now. I've delighted myself enough with my company. I knew what I was going to say anyway. There were no surprises. So if anybody would like to ask me a question now, I would very much like that. Thank you very much. Bear in mind that if you don't start putting your hands up soon to ask me questions, I will sing until someone does that. My song of choice, which I find provokes people to speak quite quickly, is Wuthering Heights by Kate Bush. You're scared, you don't want to hear it. Macy, I mean, even though I'm trying to encourage you to ask me questions, I do find that slightly hurtful. That was... If you'd pause, you could have let me get to the verse. Just the end of the first verse. What? Oh, yeah, no, I can point at people. Yes, no. I've got my feminist finger. No, don't worry about that. That's very sweet of you. Thank you. No. I can do pointing. Yes, I'm pointing. Oh, shit. The attack has started. The aliens have come. My hangover did not like that.
I'll speak quietly into this microphone. If it makes you feel any better, it was an enthusiastic hand raise rather than a critical one. So, having read your memoirs... I can
Shout. Oh, it's like Paul McCartney when his microphone failed at Live Aid.
Having read and enjoyed your memoirs so much, can you talk about... Because clearly the character of Joanna's close to you, right? Can you talk about the things you got to explore about yourself by fictionalizing her that maybe you couldn't have in a memoir?
Yeah, there's this bit at the front of the book where it just goes, all resemblances to characters living or dead are completely accidental, they're all products of my imagination. That's a lie. You have to do that for legal reasons. Well, the thing was, in How to Be a Woman, I deliberately made that is the story of my life, my first memoir, the story of my life. And in that, I deliberately chose each chapter is something that happens to pretty much every woman. They're quoted in experiences of being a woman. So masturbation, menstruation, growing hair, abortion, whether you want to have children, whether you don't want to have children, fantasy love affairs, eating disorders. So they're experiences that sort of all women will have, or sort of most women will have, you know, a variety, a grab pack of those fun times. But then I've had a very weird and unusual life. You know, I was sort of writing when I was 16 and meeting all these famous people and kind of having, you know, these nuts experiences. So I wanted to tell the story of my life again, but this time with all the weird stuff that isn't a usual experience. And I was like, but I can't write two non-fiction memoirs. That's a bit weird. Even Jesus only got one testament. That's a bit odd. So it seemed obvious that it should be a novel. And also, the whole thing about fiction is that it means you can make stuff up. It's basically lies. They've now explained what fiction is to you. It's just making things up. It's a lie. And this is one of the reasons why I was a very bad journalist. I would just make things up. I've stopped now, but like, for instance, when I interviewed Marilyn Manson about 20 years ago now, probably, and I found he was incredibly funny and incredibly intelligent. I really enjoyed hanging out with him, and he was very, gave me a lot of very unusual answers. For instance, I asked him what his favourite film was, expecting him to say 121 Days with Sodom or something, or Taxi Driver, and he went, "It's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory." I was like, "Why is that?" He went, "It's a Christ allegory. Charlie is Christ, Wonka is Satan. Satan tempts Charlie, and if he resists temptation, he will get the keys to heaven, the chocolate factory." It's like, wow, okay, that's great. So back at home transcribing this, that's a really interesting answer. That's really interesting. That's really great. But God, wouldn't it have been even better if he'd ended that quote by going, "And I like the bit where fat Augustus Gloop gets stuck in the chocolate tube." So I'm thinking how great it would have been if he had said that. And I smoke a cigarette and I think, it would have been so great if he'd said that. It would have been so great if he'd said that. I would have loved it if he'd said that. I'm going to make him say it. And I put it in and it was published. And then 3 weeks later, he played a gig at the Brixton Academy in London and got on stage and went, "If Caitlin Moran's here tonight, I want you to grab her head and smash it against the wall. She tells lies." Which was true. Of course, I wasn't there. I was at home watching Antiques Roadshow, but nonetheless, it did teach me an important lesson about ethics. So yes, but that's the great thing about fiction. You can just kind of go, so many of the things in there are kind of based on truth, but then you can kind of like make it even funnier or kind of go off. And the analogy that I use is like Little House on the Prairie, Laura Ingalls Wilder. She was a pioneer girl and she went across those plains with Ma and Pa. But a lot of the individual incidents that happened in those books didn't happen to her. They happened to other pioneer girls or friends that she knew, and she put them into the work of fiction. So it's the same here, kind of like this is a book about a 16-year-old girl who becomes a journalist and goes to London and has a lot of sex, which happened to me. But a lot of the individual penises that happened to Johanna didn't happen to me. They happened to friends or loved ones. So yes. Another question, and hurry because my Kate Bush powers are strong. High on a windy, winding moor. I don't know the rest of the lyrics. In green
as lovely as that is.
You had a temper like my jealousy. Sorry.
Okay, so I want to ask, do your daughters think you're cool? And how do you mother in the spirit of what you tell all the rest of us as women to do? Like, how do you help them to grow up to be the strong feminist women that you think everyone should be?
Cash incentives. Every time they say screw the patriarchy, I give them £5. If you think about it for 1 second, you'll know exactly how my children think about me. They think I'm a big, hairy, shouty idiot, just as all teenage girls do feel about their mothers, I suspect. There are three groups of people I know will never read my books: my parents, my siblings, and my children. And as they've all explained to me, they simply don't want to read a book about my masturbatory habits, and that is fair enough. They've been, I guess they've learned by example, kind of like, my feminism is, I think a lot of feminism, and sort of where I think personally feminism goes wrong, particularly sort of very academic and politicized feminism, is to believe that feminism is a set of rules, almost like you're in the Girl Guides and you kind of get your badges for sort of knowing about all these things and knowing all the words and kind of adhering to the rules, and you have to dress in a certain way, you have to say certain things and believe in certain things, almost as if they were trying to make just one kind of woman, which is obviously completely illogical because there are 3.3 billion women in the world, and so there'll be 3.3 billion different kinds of feminism. And we all have our own interests and our own different ways of dressing and things that we wish to do, and the whole point of being a human being is to find out what it is that you want to do and to do it in a joyful way without getting on other people's nerves. So my feminism is not rules but tools. It's simply giving girls the tools to understand that if something happens that makes them feel uncomfortable, like someone wolf whistling them in the street, or if they're watching a music video where women are being objectified, or if they're in a situation where they're being told that they shouldn't be into science because they're girls, that they have the tools to understand that is some patriarchal bullshit, and then to do the most important thing, which is to laugh at the person who has just said the stupid thing. It's very, very hard to oppress 52% of the population when they're laughing in your face when you say something stupid. That is. And this is why I love, my God, my feminist dream just totally came true and better than I ever thought. Because, now the biggest wave of feminism that's happening at the moment is all cultural. It's Amy Schumer, it's Tina Fey, it's Amy Poehler, it's Mindy Kaling, it's the Broad City Girls, it's Lena Dunham. They're making it fun. They're showing you stories and characters where women are dealing with this stuff and they are laughing at it. Amy Schumer is just showing you the ridiculously of what it is you're supposed to be when you're a woman and just going, well, that was never going to work, was it? Like, kind of... Who could actually do all that stuff? You would be insane. So yeah, we are living in, this is, without a question of a doubt, the best time it has ever been to be a woman. We're not being burnt at the stake. I know! Let's remember that every day, man! Woot! Although, to be honest, I do feel slightly like I'm being burnt at the stake right now. I'm moving to the nausea phase of this hangover now. The lycra content in jeans means that you get a closer fit than ever on the ass and crotch, like kind of, we've got Benedict Cumberbatch's face. It's a fantastic time to be alive. Another question. Yes. It's going to take you a long... Oh, no. I was going to say it's going to take a long time to get the microphone over there, and I was going to start singing, but no, okay.
I'm a rabid fan and Twitter stalker, so I'm basically just interested to know what else that you're producing that we can get a hold of. So is Raised by Wolves going to be released in Canada and the US?
Oh, thank you for asking me. That's a question I should have asked me, because it would allow me to talk about me. Yeah, it also allows me to moan and look a bit noble for a couple of minutes. Basically 5 years ago when How to Be a Woman sold 1 million copies, loads of people went, do you want to do cool things? They went, do you want to make films? Do you want to make TV shows? Do you want to do a stand-up tour? Do you want to keep on writing columns for the Times? And I was like, yeah. But the problem is when you say yes to all that stuff, you then have to spend the next 5 years actually doing it. And, I'm really not exaggerating at all to say my bum hurts so much. I've spent so long sitting on a chair. This is the first time I've stood up for more than 5 minutes since about 2007. I feel quite giddy. So yeah, at the moment, How to Build a Girl is going to be a film, and we start shooting next year. And it looks like, I'm pretty sure who's going to be playing Johanna, and I wish I could tell you because I know you'd be so excited. It's just, I literally go, you can't, whenever I used to see people on chat shows going, yeah, well, I can't talk about that because the contracts haven't been signed, I'd be like, no, go on, tell us, you teasy motherfucker. But you literally can't until the contracts have been signed. But if you watch TV and you like the kind of TV shows that I think you probably like, then it's going to be amazing. And so we're doing that, and then I write a sitcom with my sister called Raised by Wolves, and that's about a fat working class teenage girl who's obsessed with sex. And at this point you might be starting to go, hang on. Written a novel about a fat working class girl obsessed with sex, and then the TV show, a fat working class girl obsessed with sex, and then the film's going to be about a fat working class girl obsessed with sex. Are you running a little dry here? What are you doing there, Moran? But it's a Woody Allen deal. Woody Allen just does the neurotic Jews in New York. I just do fat working class girls. And to prove this, that's what I'll always do. They're my thing. I'm always going to do it. To prove this, the next book, because this is the first of a trilogy, the next book's going to be How to Be Famous, and then the last one's How to Change the World. And then after that, the next book that I'm writing is set in the 9th century in Scotland. And that is also about a fat working class teenage girl who's obsessed with sex. They're my girls. I fucking love them, man. It's not like they're being overrepresented, is it? That's, except by me, obviously. I am the problem. So, yes, I'm doing that. So we're doing the TV show, doing the film, and still writing for the Times, and I did a stand-up tour last year. That was amazing. And then, as if I wasn't busy enough, I kind of accidentally started to write another film because I found this amazing girl. Oh, my God, I'm so in love. There was this girl, she's a true life story, she's a true girl. She was in the 17th century in France, and her name was Julie de Aubigny, and she was raised at Versailles, and her father worked at Versailles, and her mother died very young, and so her father taught her to be an incredible swordswoman. She was like an absolutely extraordinarily badass swordswoman. And then at the age of 16, she got talent scouted by the Paris Opera and became the biggest star in France. She was absolutely rich. She's this beautiful ginger girl, just absolutely stacked, really funny, bit of a boozer, sort of like a very outrageous, and she was like the biggest star. She was like the Beyonce or Gaga of her day. But she was also a bisexual cross-dresser. And so by day, when she would see girls at the Paris Opera being kind of, objectified or abused, or, the men there would be attempting to rape them, she would kind of like go, right, okay. She would perform her amazing gig, come off stage, go straight to her dressing room, dress as a boy, go out into the alleyway, and when the sexist motherfucker came out, she would run him through with her sword whilst singing. That was her thing. Was dressed as a boy, and she had sex with the girls and she had sex with the boys. One of the boys that she picked up, she beat him in a sword fight. He was a noble, very handsome nobleman. She beat him in a sword fight, and he went to his bed to tend his wounds. And she felt so guilty about the fact that she'd hurt a very beautiful boy that she went to say sorry to him, and they ended up having sex. Now that is a meet cute. That is. So I just fell in love with this girl so bad that we just started writing that film as well. So I kind of managed to ram that in as well. So these are the things that I'm doing. Thank you for that question. Lady there.
So there's a lot of sex in How to Build a Girl, but I was a little struck by the lack of talk about contraception.
Yes. Well, she was an idiot. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. This will be addressed. I mean, the sex in this book is deliberately bad, and it's very notable that even though she's having sex with all these people, the only person who ever makes her come is herself, and that is a very deliberate thing. The next book is all about good sex, because I wanted to write pornography for a very long time, because I think female pornography will be very different to male pornography. For me, it's very synesthesiastic, it's very psychedelic, kind of you have these whole scenarios, you have different colours in your head and different patterns, and I want to write, I want to write about female sexuality in a beautiful way that makes women go, actually, sex is good. I like this. I can be in charge of this. And I think women, men have sort of told us all their ideas about sex. I think you guys have said everything you have to say about sex now. I think we know what you're thinking, we know what you're doing. We've not heard much from the ladies. And my theory is that women are better at sex than men. I think it's the thing that we should be in charge of. It's better when women are in charge of it. Just the simple fact that we can come over and over and over again, whereas men get to do it once. I try not to be pitying about that, but guys, you are missing out. It's like, if I could, yes. So I want to write about that, just kind of about how we're naturally the better fuckers. And I think that's very important that we attend to that matter culturally. But yeah, she is an idiot. She's a total idiot, and she deserves the society she gets. She should absolutely be using contraception. Any more? Heathcliff? Okay, so good.
I was wondering if you've had any, I guess you call them networks, the television, the people producing your television show. Have you had any fights with them over what you're putting on television? Have you had to go to bat for something, maybe probably sexual, probably with female sexuality, in terms of that?
brilliant question, thank you. Well, right at the beginning, because I wrote the sitcom with my sister before I got pregnant with my first daughter, so that's 15 years ago. And we took it into all the networks, and they said two things. They said, first of all, we love it, we love it, we love it. But just three things could you change. Could you not make them be home educated? Could you not make them sisters? And could you maybe set it in a school? I was like, well, I've got nothing on those subjects. That's all I know is home education and sisters. I've never even been to a school. I would have to research what it's like to be in a school. I would have to basically watch Saved by the Bell and base it on that. I've got nothing, so that's going to be a bit difficult. And then the other thing they said was, we love it, we love it, we love it, but we've got a sitcom this year with a woman in it, and we've got one next year with a woman in it. So could you come back in 3 years' time? And I was so angry that was genuinely the point where I just went, right, I'm going to have to write a best-selling novel about feminism that's funny, that proves you can have more than one funny woman a year. And I went away and wrote How to Be a Woman. And that was how we got it commissioned, because once that had sold, everybody sort of went, yeah, we were now interested. We now see there can be more than one funny lady a year. I forgot to say when you were asking me about Raised by Wolves coming to the US that I've got meetings on Monday with some people who, again, I would be able to guess generally what kind of TV and you people in the room are into. And I'm having a meeting with two incredibly exciting people on Monday who they want to make a US version of Raised by Wolves. And if we make it with the people I'm talking to on Monday, I fangirl about it. So so that's gonna be very, very, very exciting. So yes, that's so hopefully there will be a US version of Raised by Wolves. Amazing. Thank you. Is that all of the questions? Because I can start doing my Kate Bush dance. I can spin. You want that, don't you? That's why you're deliberately. You've got millions of questions, but you're deliberately allowing me to sing. Cool. Okay, this will be the last question here, and then we'll do a signing. Hi darling.
Hi.
Amazing glasses, by the way.
Thank you.
Can you stand up and show everyone, because they are directional. That is a strong look. Aren't they awesome? That's beautiful. Pea green glasses.
Thank you. I actually have recently written a memoir also, and I've come to a theory about memoirs and historical novels and sort of fiction in general that has to do with the current times, which I think is the most exciting time for visual culture, which is something I'm very interested in. But
is it a picture book?
No, the book is not a picture book that I wrote. The book I wrote is, it has pictures in it, but it's a kind of memoir, it is a memoir of my experience with an artist. But anyway, my question is,
yes.
Do you think that the internet has not only been wonderful for women because you now have this ability to say things that are heard everywhere, but also because the internet has changed the definition of marginal character?
Yes. No, absolutely. Well, that's one of the key things. Previously you could be alone. So many people were alone. If you were the only girl in your town who was into the Stone Roses and being feminist and wanting to build rockets and go to the moon, you probably wouldn't meet anyone in your local area who was like that. But now you can simply go into Google and go feminists into Manic Street Preachers and going to the moon, and suddenly you'll just be able to connect with these people all over the world. And we are finally allowed to, make the gangs and see each other. And so much incredible activism has been done, not just in feminism, but for people of color and trans issues as well on the internet, because we're finally able to talk to each other for the first time, unmediated, and find each other and campaign. And the way that trans issues have happened has been absolutely incredible. I've never seen a human rights movement happen as quickly as that happened. It was nowhere on the radar 4 years ago, and now you have a TV show, a cover of Time magazine with Laverne Cox, then Caitlyn Jenner, and boom, in countries now you can change your gender on your passport. We're talking about it. There's people are understanding these terms in a way that I've never seen it happen so rapidly. So it's an incredibly beautiful and joyous thing. And then on top of that, sometimes someone will tweet a picture of a weasel riding on the back of a woodpecker, and you're like, can life get any better? So I'm 100% pro Wi-Fi. Well, that's it. Thank you so much for coming. I will be doing a signing. I don't know where the signing is, but you probably know this place better than I do, so come and find me for a signing. Come and have hugs. Let's hang out. Thank you very much. Good night.